Welcome back, everyone, to AFFCNY's pre-conference interview series. I am Shaman Vizzi. I'm going to bring you another interview with yet another workshop presenter for this year's conference. Today, we have Lisa Maynard. This is probably the third or fourth time I've had the privilege of interviewing Lisa. Let's see what she's going to bring to us for this year's conference. Well, welcome back, everyone. Yet another installment of our pre-conference interview series. And here we have with us today, Lisa Maynard. Lisa, welcome back for I think this is like our fourth or fifth time we've ever done this. Welcome back. Why don't you, for those that have not met you before, why don't you introduce yourself and how you're connected to adoption from foster care?
Okay, terrific. So I'm Lisa Maynard. I am I'm a therapist in upstate New York. I'm also an implementation and training specialist with the Center for Adoption Support and Education and the National Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Initiative based in Burtonsville, Maryland. I'm an adoptive parent of two now grown-up adults and have been working in this field for a very long time. So
I don't think I've asked you this. How did you, I might have over the millions of times, how did you get connected to the coalition? How did you and the coalition kind of find each other?
Well, that's a very long ago story. So when
no, I just dated everybody.
Yeah, totally. Somehow, yeah. Judith Ashton was the executive director at the time, and I had with a partner, Cindy Fleischer, as we were both involved in Love the Children support group, adoption support group, and we had decided to start a new organization called Adoption Resource Network Inc., or ARNI. We called it ARNI, and ARNI was going to serve the adoption triad. Adoptees, adoptive parents, and birth parents, and anyone who is connected with foster care, guardianship, kinship care. And it was the first of its kind in New York, a support group bringing the triad together. And we got a grant from the coalition to get started, get it off the ground. And so I have been totally dedicated and committed to the coalition since then. That was 1990 something. I was but a child.
Oh. Wow. Well, thanks for explaining that. Why don't you tell everybody, you said that you're an implementation specialist. What exactly does that mean?
I know, so confusing, right? Nobody knows. So we have this web-based self-paced training called NTI, the National Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Initiative. It's to educate child welfare and mental health professionals to give them a level of competency in adoption that really just hasn't been seen before. And so my job is to go around the country and help child welfare and mental health organizations integrate the training into their training milieu. And it's web-based, it's self-paced, and it's free, funded by the Children's Bureau.
Wow. Okay. So we'll go, that will lead me right into, let me just go right into talking about the title, because then that will flow right into that. And your title that you're presenting at this year's conference is Making a Case for Adoption Competency, which you were just talking about. Why don't you explain the title and the description of what you're actually going to be presenting this year?
Okay. So why is it important to have adoption competency, right? And this has been something that I've been advocating for since we started ARNI, that professionals who serve our kids and our families really need to know the core issues of adoption, how adoption, foster care, how trauma impacts a child's, their social, emotional, behavioral development and well-being. And when professionals don't have a clear understanding of that, and don't have that competency, they could actually do more harm than good. So in all my years of doing this, and it's been more than 30 years somehow, I've had people say to me, I was working with a therapist and they really didn't know anything about adoption. And then, my kid was acting out and they told me to give my kid back. And what do you think? It's like, what? Give your kid back? Like, first of all, give your kid back to who? And Pat always says this, we're not in this to traumatize traumatized children. We're not in this to hurt children. And that's what that does. Giving a child back, which is just makes my blood curl, right? Is not okay. And for a therapist to suggest that, to me, means that they don't really have a good understanding of the core issues of adoption. And so this training and this workshop really is meant to say, it's super important to have an understanding of the core issues of adoption. What are the strategies, tools, and skills that are needed to address the challenges that families and kids are facing? And how do we really embed these in our day-to-day practice as a therapist, as a child welfare provider? And then how do we translate those and help parents understand as well?
No, I was going to ask you, because there's a lot of people that come to probably you or me in life and say, well, my kid's going to a therapist, they have one, and they don't have the background, and it's very hard to find adoption competent therapists or that are trained. How do you feel that this translates to the schools? I know that it's very difficult to get the schools to understand, because everyone kind of throws the word trauma out, especially now.
Right.
They're throwing it out like they've never, oh, well, everything's trauma now. Well, how do you feel it translates to the schools?
Yeah. So trauma has an impact, right? And our kids' loss and grief is at the core of it as well. In terms of schools, we did a pilot. NTI did a pilot with schools in West Virginia or Maryland. I can't remember which state it was. That was somebody else's role. But to get into the schools and say, again, having an understanding of the core issues of adoption is really important, because our schools are filled with kids who are adopted, right? Or being raised by grandparents or step parents or guardianship, aunts or uncles. And so having that expertise is really important. I remember my daughter, she just reminded me of this recently, and she's now 32. She said, remember, Mom, when I was in elementary school and they had me go to a support group for, it was divorcing parents. We were getting divorced. And I said, oh gosh, I don't really remember that. And so the parents weren't told that the kids were involved in this. There's no understanding of what this means to our kids who were adopted, and putting them in a group. There's like, people, what are we doing? You have to have a better understanding of those core issues in order to really help our kids and not make them feel more isolated, more like they don't belong, more like they're different. And when we're doing that, we're doing a real disservice to the kids and to the families, because we parents, right, Shemin, we deal with the fallout.
Very much so. And I love the fact that that the coalition is actually here. That's one of the reasons why I like doing what I'm doing, because there's so many people, like I just said, but my kid has a therapist, or there's nothing, they're not dealing with it in school, but they don't realize where, like you said, the core issues come from. And sometimes even just knowing just that little bit really does start connecting the puzzle for everybody and understanding, like, wow, I didn't see it that way. And my big word, as I've gone through this for the last 15 or 16 years, is perspective.
Yeah, totally.
I use that if that's what I go. Perspective is such a big word, because there's so many people involved in all this, from professionals to adoptive parents, biological parents, adoptee, like there's so much that no one seems to understand the other person's side. And I think a huge missing piece.
Yeah. In fact, the tagline for Adoption Resource Network was Perspectives on Adoption.
I'm telling you, I've learned that. I know no one really wants to hear my perspective, but I always say, like they usually like there's 2 sides or 3 sides to every story. I'm like, no, there's actually 4. There's your side, my side, the truth, and what everyone sees or perceives.
Right.
It's a very different, because there's people who look from the outside and don't realize the truth.
Yeah, they
So
don't understand, right? And my perspective is different than my kids' perspective. Is probably way different than their birth parents' perspectives.
very
Uh,
much so. Very
yeah,
much so. And we just have to learn to be open-minded to understand that maybe we're not in their shoes, but we can be open to understanding they do have a different side to this.
yeah,
Um,
and then
which,
have empathy for it, right?
which leads me into the fact that wonderful Lisa Maynard always steps in and helps us out. So during the conference, she opens up with mindfulness for us all. Why do you feel that that's important for everyone going to a conference to start off with, especially when we're going to be on a Zoom all day long?
Yeah. Right,
Why,
right.
why do you feel it's important?
I have come to believe that mindfulness is so crucial to our lives, to be present in this moment, to be grounded, get your feet on the ground, get quiet in yourself, get calm in yourself, and then take things in from a real calm perspective, right? So when we are super elevated, super agitated, it's hard to take in information. It's hard to process information. It's hard to problem solve. So if we can get grounded in a mindfulness practice, we could do that, we could do that every day, right? And so starting the conference with that is a way to say, this is really something that's important, and it's really good self-care, and it's a really great practice so that you're not, so that you have the capacity to meet the day's challenges, right? So you can take in that information, so you can process that information. So you're not just, blah, all over the place.
Well, why don't you do the last thing is you've done this so many times. Why don't you plug the why should they come and see you and listen to you at the conference this year?
Well, they should come to listen to my workshop because it's a fabulous workshop. I'll tell you all about NTI, our web-based, self-paced, and free training for adoption competency for mental health professionals and child welfare professionals. Great tools and strategies to pass on to kids. Why should you come to the AFFCNY conference? Oh my gosh, it is the best conference in the state. It is the place to get all kinds of information, all kinds of support, meet other people who have similar interests and similar perspectives, and great, great, great resources. I am your biggest cheerleader.